And it happens quite often to me. Driving down the road, probably have your wife in the car, and you're going somewhere. You may not have been there before. You may look kind of familiar or have an idea of where you're going. But you get out on an interstate, you get close, and then you see an exit, and you think, man, is that the one I need to take? That looks familiar. And you have your wife saying, yeah, I saw that in the map, and I remember that from last time, and that's one you need to go down. And then you have this GPS over here that's saying, keep going around, you need to turn around at the next. And then you have your kid in the back saying, I just talked to Siri, and it said that we need to go over into Mississippi. You have all these people telling you different places to go. And so you said, okay, I'm going to go with my gut, and you take this next exit. But then what happens? You start to see this unfamiliar place, and then you see that you're out in the middle of nowhere, and it kind of hits you, and you know it. You don't say anything quite yet, but you know it. You're lost. You've been there, but what do you tell your wife? Huh? What do you tell your wife? Oh, I know exactly where we are. We'll get there in just a little bit. Kids, we're going to be there in just a little bit. But you can only tell them that so many times before they catch on and they start to worry. It's funny, I read that they did a study not too long ago, it was actually late 2010, that showed the stubbornness of men. And I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you something that's going to save you $3,000. Okay? Over the lifespan, the driving lifespan of a male, they calculated that when he was so stubborn, he wasted 276 miles because he didn't want to ask for directions. 276 miles. And then if you put in the gas with that, that's $3,000. So, I just made you money this morning. You get that for free, okay? But I think we see in the text here today in James that's sort of the same thing that's going on. They want to get to a destination. They want to make the right decision. There's something wrong. Something is not right. They've been dispersed. James is writing to the Jews that have been dispersed after Acts 12 from Herod Agrippa I. And so they're kind of like us when we get out on the interstate, and they're going good because this is just 15 years after Christ has been on the cross. So they're still eyewitnesses. But so they're good for a while, and then all these voices come in. They're at a different place, they're in a different culture. They got all these voices telling them which way to go, and they start to listen. So if you would, start with me here. And once again, we're in James 3:13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show by his good life his works in meekness of wisdom. But if ye have bitter jealousy and faction in your heart, glory not, and lie not against the truth. The wisdom is not a wisdom that cometh down from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For when jealousy and faction are, there is confusion in every vile deed. But the wisdom is from above. It is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without variance, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace for them that make peace. Now you say, where does wisdom come in all this? I understand what you're saying. You see, we need to kind of back up and say, where is James coming from? Where has he already been? And that's in the first chapter of James. And we kind of looked at that the other day. But what he said so far is he says, okay, I understand you've been in trials and you're going through some things. Persevere. He says, if you lack wisdom, ask for it from God, and He'll give it to you freely, abundantly. But he goes on and he says, you know, I know some of y'all have had some of these other things come in your life, and you've had this inclination that God is doing this to you and that God is in the wrong. He says, let me assure you that God doesn't do that. That is not God. Every gift that is good comes from Him. And then we saw the passage the other day how faith without works is dead. And then we see that James kind of fleshes that out in the later chapters, and he says, okay, well, if that's the case, then there's these things that you should do that flow naturally from who you are. And that's where we are in here in wisdom. Is if we are that regenerated person, and we have those gifts from God, if we have wisdom, then it will show in our life if we accept it from God. And that's what James is trying to tell him here. He says, if you accept the wisdom from God above and apply it to your lives, then you'll be in the right. You'll be in the right. If you accept the wisdom from above and apply it to your lives, you'll be in the right. Let's look at how he comes about this. We see in verse 13, you have this question. Who is wise and understanding among you? Simple question, right? What if I asked in here, who among you is a real man? You may be a little offended, right? Because when I say that, when I ask you, is there any real men in here, that means that it's not evident, right? That means that I think, well, I don't really see it. I've got to ask for it. I don't think James is totally trying to be mean, but he's being pungent. He's showing them, that's what I'm looking for, and I don't really see it. And that's his overall meaning here is, I've got to see it. Because if it's there, it's going to come out in fruit. So look with me in the last part of that section. It says, okay, show. It says, let him show. That's not a kind, gentle, okay, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to kind of see your documentation of where you think you have this. It's not asking for a survey. This is an aorist imperative saying, show it to me. The picture is of a judge, and you're in front of a judge, and he says, okay, well, you make this claim and this sentence. Where's your evidence? Let's see it. So that's what he's asking here. And he kind of gives the answer is what we should look for, and when we give those pieces of evidence. So he says, by His good life, that's how we do it, we are to show His works. So the works is the evidence that we see. And how do we get this over here? How do we get the works, the fruit, the good fruit? And it's by our life, the decisions that we make every day. That's how we get over here to our fruit. And that's what he's hinting at. But you don't do that just out of your own will or out of your own striving. It comes out of the meekness of wisdom. And we'll look at meekness of wisdom and what that means. But, first of all, we have to understand that there is a huge shift here in this next section about what is and what isn't. So in verse 14, we have this big but. Okay, it's not a bare but it's a transition but. It's probably just as offensive. But what we have here is he's saying, okay, well, if you have this over here, show it to me, and that's the evidence. And he says, but if ye have bitter jealousy and faction in your heart, glory not. So keep that in mind, that there is something and there is nothing. So we have wisdom. And so what is wisdom? Wisdom in the Jewish culture, the Jewish tradition, was to have this insight or this skill and the understanding there in verse 13 when it talks to wise and understanding. Those are a little bit different. Wisdom is the insight that you have, and then the understanding is the skill, the expertise that you use to put it together to be able to form a good choice and decision about what to do in that circumstance. And usually that's done in a not so happy circumstance. So, wisdom is that, but what's the other little pieces of wisdom that we can understand here? Surely we can't just say, okay, show me your good works, and then we go do it. How do we get there? How do we get those pieces of evidence? We'll look further down, and we're just gonna skip a few verses because, like I said, there's a shift there. So go on down to verse 17. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without variance, without hypocrisy. That is wisdom. But one of the first things it says is it's first from above. It's from above. What does that mean? Is it raining? No, he's referring back to chapter 1. And turn with me back to chapter 1 real quick. We see here in verse 5, but if any of you lacketh wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth to him all liberally, and upbraideth, and it shall be given to him. It comes from God. In the Old Testament, you hear all these things. Well, the beginning of wisdom is fear of God. And that's true. So let me ask you, when it comes down to the things that you see as wisdom, when your wife gets on Pinterest and she shows you a picture with a phrase on it, and she says, man, this sounds good. Do you say, yeah, that does sound good? Or do you say, on what basis? Do you say, where does that come from?